Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now it's only taken me about 4 years, but finally there's a channel intro. Hooray! Which, short, sweet and simple, just like me. Today what I'm going to show you is how you can use just one color to highlight near enough anything. Ordinarily when we paint, we tend to go through a system of applying a base color, a shade, and then moving up through 2 or 3 different other colors over the top to highlight. And it gets asked occasionally, is it possible to mix your own highlights and get a fairly decent result without having to buy 8,000 paints? And the short answer is, yeah, of course it is. But instead of using white, which will give you a slightly chalky finish, instead use ivory. So I'm going to show you on this US Infantryman here how you can mix that into some of your highlights and to essentially go through all of that without having to buy 1,000 paints, but this will work for just about anything. So nice and quick, let's get started. So I have here my brave volunteer. I will list the paints that I've used for him in the description below, but these are the same as I've used in the Battle Ready US Infantry video I did a couple of years ago now. I'll include them just for thoroughness' sake. I'm going to start off, I have here a little Reichland flesh shade. Ordinarily I would just agrax the whole lot, but this method will look a little nicer if you do use a flesh tone on the skin. So let's just apply a little bit of this over, well, his skin. And once that's dried, we can go straight to applying some Agrax Earthshade. Now, of course, you will have already done all of your cleanup stages. So if you have to tidy up anything before getting to this point, I'm skipping over that part, of course. I'm using a slightly smaller brush than usual because I don't want to bucket the whole miniature in this. And when I come near skin, face and hands, I want to slow down a little bit and have some more control. And once that's dried, though he is a little dark, he's more or less finished. You could put him on the table like this, as I'm fond of saying. You could also go straight to some of your highlights, like mix in a little bit of ivory to your base colors and start applying that as a highlight now. But this will look better if we take a little bit of time first and go back over some of the areas with our base colors again. So what I'm going to do, if I can get him in shot here properly, is to go over most of his jacket with some German camo beige again, but leave a little bit of the shaded color in the recesses. I'm going to do this with all of the base coats. So skip over this a little bit. We'll come back and have a look at what that looks like when that's just a little bit tidier. Now with just his jacket and his gaiters highlighted, I think you'll see a little bit about where we're going with this. It's quite a nice smooth transition of color, although it can take a little bit of practice to know exactly where you want to leave those gaps, but that comes with time. What I'm going to do now is the same thing to all the other colors, maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. I don't think I need to fuss too much with his rifle, but we'll come back and have a look at this in a second. Now, using the base colors, I have highlighted his jacket, trousers, skin, and his webbing, and that's not looking too bad. Like I always say, no reason you couldn't chuck him on the table. But we are going to go a little bit further. So I'm going to put him aside for a second because I want to show you how I'm going to do these mixes. Now for these, I always find it easier to start with a little splash of fresh paint. You could theoretically mix it into what you've already got on your palette, but I think you get a better result by using fresh stuff. And we're going to mix in a little bit of ivory. This is a magic color. Now this works a little better than white because a pure white, it will give you a slightly different, not faded, but more washed out color. Whereas ivory by comparison tends to look like slightly sun bleached or just faded color. So next to our German camo beige, I'm going to add about the same in ivory. Now, don't worry if it's not exactly the same amount, and if you are worried about it, err on the side of a little bit more of your base color. That will look better. So I'm going to pop just a little bit of water into my brush, and I will now mix these together. Now, by comparison, that's going to look quite light, but when we apply it, it will darken down a little as it loses the moisture in the color. So let's get about that. Get a little bit of our half and half mix. And we'll apply just a little bit to the corner of his sleeve first of all. Let's get that in shot. Always a good spot to test this because it doesn't matter if it's just a little too bright. But yeah, that looks about right. What I'm going to do is apply this to all of the high points on the miniature, like I normally would for a highlight. But by using this mix, we'll get a very smooth transition of color. Now the other advantage here is that if there's any areas where you go a little overboard, so say I, oh dear, splatter too much there, because I've only gone over it with the base coat, I can actually tidy that up by going back to my German camo beige and straightening out this highlight. Anywhere that I've gone into a recess that I want to stay dark and shaded, again, I can just go back to my shade and splash a tiny wee bit of that in there. Now after going over all of the jacket, you'll see we get a really neat, smooth transition, and I'm quite pleased with that. But you can take it a little bit further. If you do want, for example, his lapels to stand out a little bit more, I'll just add in a touch more ivory, just a little bit at a time, and you can start very carefully jabbing in those extreme edges. This is really up to you. I'm not going to take it any further than this. I think you'll see very quickly you can get out of hand with this, but it works quite well. So what I'm going to do now is to go around all of the other colors that I've already highlighted. So his trousers, his pack, and his skin, I'm going to highlight using that same 50-50 mix of ivory to the base color. So after going over those other colors and a little bit on the leather, there we have it. I could go back with the base coats on the rifle and a couple of other spots, but I'm quite pleased with that, to be honest. I think that's going to be fine. Now, this is not a quick way of doing things. Ordinarily, I try to show you a very simple method, and this is simple. And while it does rely on quite a bit of brush control while you're applying your highlights, the benefit being you can always go back to those base colors and tidy up very easily. So if you've got unsteady hands or you're not confident in your edge highlighting, this is a good place to start. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply a couple of decals, matte varnish them, and pop a base on. Let's have a look at this fella once everything is in context. And there at last, our soldier is complete, and the end result is more important really than the miniature that I've painted here. Hopefully that does go some way to explaining how you can use, or at least demonstrating how you can use ivory to highlight just about anything. I think the only thing I've ever seen it go a little bit peculiar on is when you add a little too much to leather colors. It does start looking like very pale skin. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including my producers, Alan Nuttall, Trainboy, Kyrie Crawford, Fred, and Jimmy. Your support means the world, folks. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comments box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.